We smell. We smell a lot better than we think we do. We smell better than most animals, except dogs, who far surpass us in this arena. Scientists estimate that humans can detect up to 1 trillion different smells. That is the average person. And yet most of us suffer under the misperception that we can't smell very well at all. Don't you find that interesting? Why do we have such a low perception of our own noses? We live in a culture that doesn't pay much attention to smell. For over 2,500 years, Western civilization has underrated its importance. It took many people losing their sense of smell due to COVID for us to begin to realize what an integral role smell plays in our everyday lives. And yet, smell still affects us more than we even know. When we were all meeting up in virtual space during the pandemic, we could see and hear one another, but we all felt that something was missing. You see, I'm of the opinion that one of the reasons we are suffering from an unprecedented loneliness epidemic and spikes in anxiety and depression is that we miss the smell of one another. I'm not talking about locker room smells or smells of uncleanliness, but subliminal smells, subtle smells, like the smell of a home that you can only sense after you've been away for a while and you come back. The smells of human presence. What does that smell like? What is it doing to us? I'm a poet, artist, scholar, sommelier, and recently a nose, which is the professional term for someone who makes perfume. I'm interested in how we smell, in both senses. That is, how we perceive things with our noses, but also the mysterious but powerful effects of our bodily smells on one another. But I wasn't always interested in smell. In fact, for most of my life, I didn't pay much attention. But then a life-changing event occurred that shifted my perspective and altered my experience of reality forever. I fell in love with wine, as well as the art of wine description. You see, a friend came to visit me when I was living in France, and she wanted to go wine tasting. So I read some books on wine, and I could not believe these wine writers could sense and feel such incredible things simply by dipping their nose into a glass. I was so envious and a little skeptical. So I set out to see if I could do it myself, if I could improve my own nose, even just a little, through practice. And 8 years later, I had passed some of the most difficult blind smell exams in the world. During this period, I was getting my doctorate in poetry at Oxford, and I realized that smell and poetry go hand in hand. We have so few words to describe smell in most languages that we have to appeal to metaphor and lyricism and anecdote to talk about it. So once I realized this, I began leading wine tastings focused on empowering others with the confidence and poetic license that they needed in order to develop their own noses. During this period when I was training my nose, it was as if a whole new dimension of reality opened up for me. I started smelling things in my dreams. I also noticed that whenever I felt anxious or sad, I could reach for something to smell and describe, and immediately I felt better. It was as if I'd found a way to short-circuit worry and anxiety simply by being present with smell. It opened up space for moments of wonder and joy. I think one of my most joyful scent memories during this period happened on just a routine walk home from the school in the French suburb of Lyon, where I was teaching. I cut through a field of grass, and I stopped because I smelled something familiar, something exhilarating. I couldn't quite put my finger on it until it hit me, quite literally, on the head. So now I'd like to invite all of you to relive one of my most joyful scent memories with me. In your gift bags, you have a white envelope with 2 scent strips. On the scent strip with a red dot, you have something called cedrine. It's found in an oil that is secreted by plants during dry periods. And it smells a bit like cedar. In the scent strip with the white dot, you have something called geosmin. It's a bacterial byproduct of healthy soil, and it smells like earth. Now, when you hold these 2 scent strips together under your nose, what you are smelling is petrichor. It's a substance that's released by the earth whenever rain falls on dry soil. For those of you watching this online, you can easily approximate petrichor by taking a bit of shaved pencil wood and mixing it with moist potting soil. Camels and humans are especially sensitive to petrichor. It's thought that we evolved to find this scent so pleasing because it helped us to locate rainy climates and fresh water. What amazed me most about this experience was not just that I had smelled rain before it fell, but that I had probably always had this capacity, only I never realized it until that moment, because that's how out of touch I was with nature and with my own nose. Developing my nose deepened my connection to nature. And soon, I fell in love with a ritual that I call a scent walk, where I set out on foot to discover the unique olfactory treasures of an environment, like the mossy, honeyed cypress notes of Tuscany, or the dewy hawthorn and birch notes in the mountain forest of Calabria. And when I realized that the smells of these biodiverse ecosystems were at risk of vanishing, I started capturing my impression of them in the form of artisanal perfumes. So then I began to wonder what other smells might be communicating subtle cues to me all the time under the radar. And my curiosity led me to the armpit. Human armpits are special. They contain apocrine glands, which secrete smelling hormones, as well as, for many of us, a unique combination of probiotic fatty acids, which scientists believe correlate to our genome. So this, plus environmental, dietary, and mood influences combine to give each of us our utterly unique human perfume. Now, what I'm talking about is different from pheromones, which technically speaking would be a molecule that produces the same reaction across the entire species. What I'm talking about is something more subtle and complex, dynamic chemosignals, aromatic molecules that communicate things about our genetic makeup, our lifestyle, and our mood to others, producing a whole range of subjective responses. So, to explore this phenomenon further, as an art project, I began leading armpit sniffing workshops. I invited participants to forego deodorant for a week and to sleep in a white t-shirt for 3 days. I then placed the t-shirts in anonymously numbered Ziploc bags, and I guided everyone in analyzing one another's armpit the same way that a sommelier would describe a fine wine. So, what happened? People were floored at how good and yet totally different everyone smelled. There were also surprising insights. People were able to guess what someone had had for dinner, that 2 of the t-shirts belonged to a couple who cohabitated, that one person had been driving a rental car for a week. Some of the t-shirts made people feel happy or protective. All of them made us feel invigorated, so much so that we had to take a breather after every 4 or 5 t-shirts. In cases where people were friends, they were unable to identify their friend's smell but nevertheless used uncanny phrases to describe their smell, such as roller coaster seatbelt, which we were then able to trace back to an early bonding experience with that person at an amusement park. When I saw how fascinating and liberating it was for people to have their armpits read, analyzed, and praised by a professional nose, I wanted to share this experience with everyone, everywhere. So, I became a performance artist. I set up a confession booth at art museums, and people lined up, sometimes for hours, to spend just a few minutes in a private confession booth with me and confess the following sin: I smell human. I then read everyone's armpit through a screen, and I described their smell to them in great detail. As people sat next to me, they whispered incredible things, such as, "My greatest fear is that I smell revolting." Now, take a moment to appreciate just how crushing this is, because it's a fear that many of us have. The idea that our body's essence is somehow foul and objectionable to others. The thing is, we all have preferences for one smell over another, but no one smells revolting. Humans typically smell of things like grated nutmeg, cumin seed, celery leaf, minced tarragon, Prince Edward Island oysters, macadamia nut butter, maybe a slightly dirty cucumber martini. At our most pungent, people smell like the forehead of a goat or French onion soup smothered in Gruyere cheese. Now, if this last one applies to you and you're concerned about it, I got a bunch of friends in Paris who would love to have your number. So all this begs the question: if humans smell this good to one another, then how did we become so self-conscious about our smell? Well, what if I told you that up until 100 years ago, no one really worried about their armpits sweating or stinking? In fact, in the 16th century, people placed handkerchiefs and peeled apples in their underarms to preserve, not disguise, their scent. But in the 1920s, the first aluminum-based antiperspirant and deodorant companies launched a series of manipulative ad campaigns designed to convince people that body odor was something that you probably could not detect yourself, that no one would ever confront you about directly. But it was definitely being gossiped about behind your back, and it could cost you your social life, your relationship, and even your job. The copywriter for Odorono is now in the Ad Men Hall of Fame because his campaign helped turn an initially useless-seeming product into a $27 billion industry. But I'm not here to shame corporate greed or manipulative advertising, actually. I'm here to spread the good news that if you think you smell revolting, it's a lie. You smell human. And not only is that natural and good, it's something that I believe is vital to your individual well-being and to our collective sense of goodwill and social trust. So, here's what I want to tell the human race. Start smelling more. I don't just mean ditch your antiperspirant and your deodorant, although I think that's a great idea. I mean start paying attention with your nose to the reality that's right under it. We're lucky to be living in a time when technology allows us to connect across space, and there are fascinating applications of scent in VR and AR that will make for more emotionally engaging experiences. But when it comes to scent, these virtual worlds will not be able to rival the 1 trillion scents that you can perceive in reality, because scent can't be digitized, and nothing but humans can smell human. But if you ask me, This technological limitation, it's a gift. It's an opportunity to become more moved by the reality that we're already immersed in. So, read books on smell. Raid your spice cabinet. Smell the leaves and stems and flowers in your garden. Smell the pits of your friends and your lovers. Just be sure to get their consent first, please. Order some essential oils. Watch your memories resurface. Read perfume and wine reviews and give yourself permission to be an eternally budding poet. You have a magic tool on your face that can lead you out of loneliness. It can unlock troves of information about others and the world around you. You've just never been taught that that's what your nose is or how to use it. And your nose, it isn't just a path toward connection with other humans and nature. It's actually a superpower that will make your understanding of and existence in the world richer and better. So please join me in reclaiming the incredible power of how we smell. Thank you.